Hey everybody, happy Monday and welcome to another Techstrong TV broadcast. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon. Today is Monday, April 4th, and we are just marching through spring here. I'm so very excited. The weather is changing. Everything seems to be getting a little nicer. The rains are coming, but that's okay. I'm okay with that. So we've got a great show on tap for you today. We've got some amazing conversations happening. We actually get things kicked off with a conversation between Alan and Eldon Ben-Haim, who is the chief architect over at Apiro. And they have a very, very important discussion about cybersecurity and culture. It is such an important element of a successful cybersecurity strategy. Culture could mean the difference between an organization being secure and not being secure. And as we all know, that it's really not a question these days of if you're going to get hit by a ransomware attack or other type of attack, but when it's going to happen. So Eldon and Alan discuss the fact that it is imperative for the silos between engineering, security, and compliance to just come down, because they've all got to work together to ensure the best cybersecurity posture, and from a cultural perspective as well as a technology perspective. So great conversation there. After that, Alan speaks with TJ Gonen, who is the head of cloud product line over at Checkpoint Software. Checkpoint Software is publishing its 2022 Cloud Security Report. There are a number of takeaways from this report, and TJ and Alan discuss them. But among them, vendors are struggling with the complexity of managing multi-cloud environment. They also talk about the skills shortages that are so prevalent in today's environment. So, like I said, there's a lot to unpack in this report, and they go over some of the more important findings. Good stuff. After that, we have Haunted Hacker Podcast. This is part 2 of the 2-part conversation that Mike Jones has with Jonathan Scott, who is a cybersecurity researcher and a privacy advocate, and Hector Santiago, who is with Cyber Defense Services. And as always, they run the gamut in their conversation. They range from cybersecurity and breaking the mold to diversity to the acid pot. I think that's how Mike Jones said that Twitter has become, and social media in general. But it's a really fascinating conversation. We ran part 1 on Thursday's Techstrong TV, so hopefully you can check back on that one if you missed it. But this is part 2, and it is a good conversation as always. After that, we have our Something Old segment. This is from the recent Predict 2022 virtual event. This presentation is by Micah Silverman, who is the Director of DevSecOps Acceleration over at Snyk. And Micah's presentation is titled Log4Shell Deep Dive, Live Debugging Log4j. And it is exactly what the title says. Micah goes into how organizations can check to find out whether the Log4Shell vulnerability is going to impact their code and their applications, and then shows what organizations need to do to mitigate that risk. It's a great presentation, and it's totally one worth checking out, especially if your organization has already taken a look at its systems and applications to see if there are vulnerabilities exist. Still want to check this one out, because Micah has some great takeaways from that might be useful in other applications as well. After that, I am back with the news headlines, and then I have a conversation with Brian Rozek, who is the CISO over at Optiv Security. And we talk about the fact that the Great Resignation is still happening, it seems like, and Brian is offering up a security checklist for offboarding employees. And it is very much a relevant conversation, and he's got a lot of really great ideas in that. So definitely want to check that one out as well. Then I've got the webinar's preview, and then I have a conversation with Nikhil Gupta, who is the CEO and co-founder of Armor Code and the Purple Book community. And Nikhil and I talk about the upcoming Purple Book on cybersecurity, the Purple Book community itself, and the upcoming AppSecCon virtual event that's happening in May, I believe it is, where the Purple Book will actually be released. And it's a really interesting take on cybersecurity from the practitioners and the experts in cybersecurity. So Nikhil and I talk about what's in the book and what folks can expect at AppSecCon as well. Good stuff there. After that, we close things out with a view with Vizard. In this conversation, Mike Vizard is speaking with Nataraj Nagaratnam, who's the CTO of Cloud Security over at IBM, and they discuss why cloud security keeps getting more challenging. That is a great topic. I'm sure a lot of organizations are asking the same thing. So hopefully Nataraj and Mike have some takeaways for you from there. All right, that is today's lineup. And as I said, it is a fantastic one. And we're going to get things kicked off right after these commercial messages.
CISO Talk. To hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
All right, we are back, kicking off today's Techstrong TV broadcast. We've got a conversation between Alan and Eldon Benheim, who is the chief architect over at Apiro, and they talk about cybersecurity as a culture issue and the fact that engineering, security, and compliance silos need to be broken down in an organization for successful cybersecurity to take place. It is a great conversation with a lot of things to think about. So let's go ahead and roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode here on Techstrong TV. My guest for this episode is Eldon Benchaim. Eldon is with Apiro. Eldon, welcome to Techstrong TV.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. So Eldon, you know what, as we were talking off camera, our audience is a technical audience, cybersecurity savvy, but they may not all know Apiro and, you know, a little about the company, what you guys do, and maybe a little of your own background. If you wouldn't mind, why don't you share with the audience a little bit about the Apiro company story and maybe a little bit of your own background?
Sure. So what we do in Apiro is we're set to help organizations building cloud-native applications to gain a good understanding of their security posture and actually detect and remediate changes from development and throughout production. We take the context of the entire application, including code, infrastructure as code, and based on all of these contexts, we're able to provide security insights and findings and help organizations remediate them.
Excellent. And Eldon, what about your background?
So, right. So currently I'm Chief Architecture Officer for Apiro. Prior to Apiro, I've been in the cybersecurity industry for, I guess, well over 15 years now. Started in Trusteer, a company that was then acquired to IBM, where I was VP R&D. And then more recently in Transmit Security, where I was CTO. And now Apiro.
Excellent. So, Eldon, we're going to talk a little bit about today about the C word, culture, right? You know, look, beyond Security Boulevard, we also are the people behind DevOps.com. And in DevOps culture is, you know, one of the main tenets of DevOps, right? You've got to have a culture that kind of embraces that DevOps mindset, if you will. We don't hear about culture being important in regards to security, in regards to cyber, perhaps as much as we should. Or maybe we don't. Maybe we don't have to. But, you know, what role does culture play in improving our cybersecurity, do you think?
Right. So if you think about software development shops, they are traditionally, security is a little bit siloed from development. There's the application security engineers and infrastructure security and network security and DevSecOps. And then there's the application developers. Now, application developers probably make, tens of potentially security impacting decisions on a daily basis. Siloing application security as, an add-on on top of this process is bound to create, a zillion of blind spots. And this is why I think that the right thing to do is to make sure that the organization culture identifies security as part of the application developer's responsibility and does not perpetuate, a siloed approach where there's the security side of the house and the development side of the house.
Absolutely. And, breaking down silos, of course, this is DevOps 101, right? Breaking down silos. And it's funny, for the last 6, 7, it'll be again this year at RSA conference, we put on the DevSecOps day there, right? A full day of DevSecOps. And what we've seen is over those years, there was a tremendous amount of distrust between the security community and the DevOps tribe. Right? The security folks said the DevOps people and the developers didn't care about security. That only security people do. The developers and the DevOps folks said the security people, quite frankly, the security people are a pain in the butt. All they ever do is say no, right? And they stop us from going faster. But that was 7, 8 years ago. Over time, we've seen these silos break down, right? The whole advent of DevSecOps, right, has really helped. I think also we've seen a lot of companies that are making security tools for DevOps teams, security tools for software developers, right? So you don't have to be a security pro to know them, right? But the security pros sign off on them. The security pros approve them, if you will. And this is done. It's done a great job of trying to break these silos down. But I don't know if culturally, the security people and the DevOps and developers are they're not like this. They may not be like this anymore, but they're not like that. What do you think?
Well, I think that's a very correct observation. I think that as long as you identify the role of the security side of the house, as you said, as approving the system security, you kind of take security in a way out of scope of the developers, right? Because there's someone who's going to approve and they're in charge of security. And what you really want to do is to have a different model where developers need to be, very much security aware. Development teams should have almost embedded or even not almost embedded security champions or security experts in them. And they need to be self-sufficient in terms of security. The role of the security organization needs to be, yes, to control the overall organizational security posture, right? Identify recurring issues, identifying chances to, optimize and improve, and obviously making sure that, the organization as a whole adheres to some standard around, training and security awareness. And yes, they should also be a control point, right? And audit and make sure that that security is there, that the products are secure, but not necessarily on a per product basis, right? I mean, this should be part of the developers' responsibility, and obviously the developers need to be empowered to do this, whether it's training or proper tooling that will give them bird's eyes view of the entire system they're working on.
I agree. Of course, the problem sometimes, though, and I hear this from many organizations, is there's not enough security people to go around. I'd love to embed a security champion on all my development teams. But if I'm a large enterprise, I have, maybe dozens of teams. And I don't have the security champions to embed. So I have to automate it. I need security champions who aren't necessarily security professionals. I need security champions who are DevOps and developers and so forth.
I agree. And part of this is actually raising the bar of what we expect from the entire development workforce. I mean, I think that it's time that we expect all of our developers to understand attack methods of operations and common vulnerability types, and to have a deep understanding of mitigations and have the habit of remaining up to speed and consuming news related to application security. This cannot remain the application security expert domain, right? Just like you don't have, every developer is expected to know how to write, concurrency safe code or, performance code. And they do not move these concerns to someone else. Of course, there's often a performance expert, but, they're there to handle the very difficult cases that require very specialized knowledge. And this is how we need to shift things. And so we don't necessarily need, security professionals per se. We just need to make sure that the development organizations have security champions that get the proper training and are minded towards that.
Absolutely. Let me play devil's advocate a little bit with you, if it's okay. I'm talking now from what I've heard from developers. DevOps has been a marvelous thing. It's allowed us to do more, go faster, improve quality, all of these things. One of the downsides of it, though, is that we have shifted more and more of the responsibility for stuff on the developers' shoulders. The developers are now more involved in testing. The developers are more involved in security. The developers are more involved in the whole CI/CD, the whole SLDC, the whole software development lifecycle, SDLC, right? And it's a funny thing when you look at who are the highest paid kind of people in that software development life cycle. It's the developers, right? A good developer is one of the highest paid people on the team. They're in the most demand, maybe even more than security. Does it make sense business-wise to keep putting more and more on the developer's plate when that seems to be the point? Like that's we're putting straws on a camel's back, right? That seems to be the greatest sort of weakness there. Are we putting too much on the developers? How much can we reasonably expect a developer to know about security, let's say?
So that's a very good question. When you look at, software construction, this is like, a major engineering undertaking. And, good engineering practices lead us to separate responsibilities and, slice and dice these projects to different, partitions, which makes sense because this is the only way we can scale. And as you said, we cannot overload single persons with too much responsibility. The important question is exactly where do you draw these partitioning lines, right? Because there are some partitions that make sense and others do not. If we all accept the fact that we cannot have a developer, scope out performance from the code that they develop, or they cannot scope out, correctness, then I think, yes, security is baked into everything that the developer does. And if that means that, every developer focuses on a smaller bit of the problem, of the big problem, but, end to end, including security, then so be it. Now, I don't think that this that this is alone the solution, right? I mean, obviously you still want to have those security focal points, right? People that will deal with the very hard, the most difficult questions, right? Just like you have performance experts or other experts in the team. But and in addition, you want to empower them with the proper tools, right? You need to provide them with tools that suit this new mode of thinking, right? That provide them the big overview of the system and the security context and provide them with the information they need to efficiently also take care of security. But if you actually scope security out, then you draw this, partitioning line in a place that's very not optimal, that's very suboptimal, right? Because you are going to impact security.
No doubt about it. So I think we're actually in agreement, which is the hard part is finding where that boundary is, right? What can we give to the developer without making their responsibility too onerous, too heavy? But we all agree that, here's my view. This is my personal view. I don't know if we all agree. My personal view that security is an issue of quality. And every developer I've never met a developer who doesn't want to develop the highest quality, right? They take pride. It's like being a craftsman. Whether you were a shoemaker or a tailor or whatever, you take pride in what you make and build. And software developers do too. And so when we look at it that way, of course they want to turn out the highest quality. But we need to balance that about where the boundary is, where you got to call in someone who has a little more security expertise to help out there, right? And I think that's where the lines get a little blurry, and that's where I think is where we run into these things.
I agree. I also think that it's important to realize that, obviously the cost of maintaining application security, if it's baked into the development process, if it's just, if the developer is trained for security, then the costs are very different from, a strap-on process, like, a security review that, requires the security researcher to gain more context and understanding and whatever, right? So, So overall, yes, we add this sort of responsibility, but if you look at the entire closed system, we reduce the total effort that's needed and improve the quality.
Absolutely, right? But putting it on, and this is the whole shift left thing, right? By shifting it left closer to the developer, where it's what's the term? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? Absolutely. So in other words, if we fix it here, it's so much cheaper than having to fix it there.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing. Eldon, we're almost out of time though, but let's bring it back to Apiro.
Sure.
How's Apiro helping with this?
Well, so Apiro is actually built to empower the user, whether it's a developer or a security professional, to gain a centralized view that encompasses the entire system they're building. It includes insights from code, from infrastructure, from cloud, and fuses this whole thing to a consistent, uniform risk posture image. You get a list of every security finding that we see in the product, based again on both inspecting the code and the infrastructure and everything in the ether, along with contextual, actionable remediation options.
Excellent. And for people who want to get more information about Apiro, where can they go?
So they can go to www.apiro.com, obviously.
APIRO, right?
That's APIIRO, correct.
Say it again. API.
IRO. APIIRO, correct.
Two I's. That's important. Make sure people get that. APIIRO.com. All right. Eldon Ben-Chaim, thanks for being our guest today on Techstrong TV. Keep up the great work. Come back and visit us soon.
Sure. Thanks for having me over.
My pleasure. All right, we're going to take a break here on Techstrong TV. We'll be right back with another guest.
All right, we're back. Next up, Alan speaks with TJ Gonin, who is the head of cloud product line over at Checkpoint Software. They talk about Checkpoint Software's 2022 Cloud Security Report, which has a lot of takeaways related to the complexity of managing multi-cloud environments and the skills shortages and so much more. A lot of takeaways from this report in this conversation. So let's go ahead and roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Techstrong TV segment. My guest this segment is, he's a frequent guest contributor here on Techstrong TV. It's TJ Gonin of Checkpoint. TJ, welcome back.
Hey Alan, always great to be here. Thank you for having me.
TJ, maybe someone hasn't seen you on here before. I don't know how they could have missed you, but give them a little bit of your background, what you're doing at Checkpoint.
Yeah, so for Checkpoint specifically, I'm the vice president for cloud security. So I run the cloud security business. Been with Checkpoint for 2 years. They acquired my company in the cloud security space, Protego Labs in the server security space. Been doing cybersecurity for 30 years, which I know I look like I'm 15 years old. So I started really young. But like you, Alan, both of them.
I was just going to say, you noticed I didn't say anything, right? Because I've learned, just go ahead. You go, man. You take the arrows. I'll sit back.
Yeah, no, I've been doing security for a while and really cloud security over the last 6-7 years. So, yeah.
Very good. Of course, we didn't call it cyber back then. It was InfoSec.
Yeah. InfoSec.
But you don't even hear that word anymore.
No, right? but the good thing is that now, literally, I was actually talking with someone yesterday, Alan. I think you'll probably experience the same. 10 years ago, you actually had to explain what you do in this world. I literally can walk the street here, meet a grandma, and say I'm in cyber. She knows what I'm talking about.
Immediately, like, absolutely.
Cyber. I don't even need to explain, cyber. Oh, okay, cyber. That's great.
But I see you have it easy. I don't. Because they say, cyber, you're helping to secure stuff? You make secure software? No, I don't do anything. Like my wife's family thinks I'm really in the mob or something, like drugs, because they can't understand. He does something with cyber, but he doesn't really do cyber. He reports on cyber. They can't figure it out. But he makes a living. And, to our family, that's what's important. But I'm kidding. I love my wife's family, in case they're watching. TJ, thanks for coming on. Checkpoint recently came out with a new report. It's the 2022 Cloud Security Report. And let me get this out of the way right out off the bat. For anyone who wants to download the report itself and have a look at all of the information, there's a ton of good stuff there. You can go to pages.checkpoint.com/2022, that's 2022, -cloud-security-report. And it's actually .html, but I think you don't even need that. And that'll take you right to the report, and you can download it for yourself. But TJ, let's talk about some of the highlights of the report that, what you found this year.
Yeah, I think most of the stuff that we look at are the things around sort of the maturity of cloud security programs and where people are putting their priorities at. Plus, I want to say almost even though I think in 2022, definitely with what's going on between Russia, Ukraine, and cyber wars. It's less of something we should probably look at less. It's almost like the fear gauge, right? How many people are really concerned and putting this as a priority? So I think one of the things that is very clear is that we are just at the early stages of adopting cloud security practices, definitely to the level of maturity that you would expect to be compared to the unbelievable adoption of cloud services and cloud infrastructure in the last year. So I think one of the interesting things that you see is that there was a super acceleration, as you know, and I'm sure you talked with other people on the show. In the last couple of years, the acceleration of cloud adoption has grown dramatically. We almost took, they said that about technology generally speaking in the COVID era, that we sort of condensed 10 years of adoption cycle into 18 months because we just had to. And that happened also in the cloud. I think what didn't happen is we didn't condense 10 years of cloud security into 18 months. So I think that the gap that was created is even bigger than what used to be before. And together with the awareness around cloud security. So I think one of the things that's very clear is that, one, the gap has expanded, I think, in the last 18 months, even though there's more technologies, but it's not necessarily been adopted as fast as cloud, which makes sense, right? Because things just move super fast. The second thing that we've seen a lot of is the real understanding, and actually I think that plays very well into your general audience, is the real understanding that if you're not shifting left, if you're not harnessing the goodwill and the good practices of secure code development and solving problems before they hit production, you're going to be too late. And there's a lot of focus there, more than any time in the last 10 years. DevOps, DevSecOps has been hot for a while. This is the first time where you see people saying, hey, I actually have a DevSecOps program and I have a shift left program. And in some organizations, it's even more, has a higher priority than the traditional, hey, let's protect the production environment. So I think as far as the highlights, these are really interesting trends.
You hit on several things there that I want to touch on. So first of all, TJ, you're 100% right. Traditionally, things like security, and especially security, have always lagged. They're like a lagging indicator, almost by definition, because security, by definition, was so reactive. So, yes, you had tremendous acceleration, digital transformation, cloud adoption, and in typical fashion, even though the security people may have been waving their hands saying, wait, we're not sure how secure this is, the business didn't wait. Business is going to do what business needs to do. Right. And so the onus then goes to the security team to say, hey, the train's left the station. You could stay here at the train waving your hands, or you could jump on the train while it's moving, right? And try to get on it. And I think we've done that, right? But here's the good news. Because of things like DevSecOps and shift left, it's been a little bit easier. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's a little easier.
Right. And I'll tell you, there's a couple of things here that are really interesting, Alan, that were really surfaced up in the research, in the survey that we've done, but I think it talks to a way bigger, let's say, trend or wave. It's exactly like you said. One of the things is that you understand, and this is really enlightening, is that you understand that when people now look at shifting left, it's a preventative mechanism. Now think about it. Usually when we say prevention, we think about, hey, there's something that's going to stop the attack. People started, I really saw it in the last 12 months. People started to understand that doing things right is probably the best preventative measure you can do, right? That's number one. The second thing, and actually, I don't know, I think we had an opportunity to talk about the acquisition we did in this space of developer-first security. We just acquired a company in that. The second thing
I remember.
Yeah, so it's actually interesting because the second thing is that you're saying is that, okay, we as security people, and you would appreciate that probably more than a lot of people I know, we've been talking down to developers forever.
For too long.
Ever. hey, these are the guys that create the problems. These are the guys, they don't care. By the way, by definition,
They don't care, right?
Developer and security, they don't care. So I think one of the things that you're starting to see, and this is really interesting, and it's actually a culmination point between the stuff you just mentioned and I mentioned earlier, which is, okay, just a second. Now with cloud and digital adoption and all these tools, these guys can move really, really fast. They just can move fast by definition. The business tells them to move fast. You as a security person, you have two options. Either be their friend or lose the battle. You are way outnumbered. So if you're going to continue and talk down to them, right?
You're a loser.
You're going to lose. By definition, you're outnumbered. And by the way, they are way more equipped. They have better weapons. They can move faster. And by the way,
I'm so glad you brought this up, man.
I got into a thing yesterday. A good friend of mine that I know in security for 25 years, 22 years.
Yeah.
I don't want to mention his name, but he's very well known, one of the first network security blogs.
Just give us his address.
I'm not going to even tell you that. But he was with one company a long time doing a lot of their research reporting, and he's recently moved to a very well-known DevSecOps company. And he wrote a thing yesterday how, he views his role there is trying to convince developers that security is their responsibility. It's that typical, I'm in security, we're the only people who care about it, they don't. And I wrote him very nicely and said, hey, you know what? I think you'll be hard-pressed to find a developer who raises his hand and says, oh no, security is not my responsibility. Of course, they all want. You're not going to find a developer who says, I want to do insecure code.
Exactly, you're right.
That's bullshit. That's in the security industry, we need to lose that arrogance or that attitude
100%.
that these people don't care. If we're not going to be on the team with them, we're not on the team.
Yes, and I think that's a great example, actually, and it's interesting that it's coming from someone who's actually in the DevSecOps, like a developer-friendly company. And you're right, but this is...
As a DevRel guy.
He's a DevRel guy, there you go. So but to your point, this has been sort of the language that we've been using in the security industry forever. It's almost like, we've colored them as the people who don't care, the dangerous ones. They move like crazy. They like, to your point, if I ask them, everybody will say, I don't care, I just go, it's your problem. It's never the case. To your point, if something bad happens, the developer knows he's going to lose sleep at night. He doesn't want to deliver on insecure code. But I think talking down to them, the condescending language is almost, and that's very interesting. It's almost how humanity translates into tools. It also translates into how tools are built. They're not built for developers to help them do the right thing, to speak their language, to say, just a second, before I solve the security problem, what does the developer want the experience to look like? How does he do stuff, right? And then bundle into that or build into that security technologies. That's why you see a lot of I'll say it on the session here, right? Most of these developer tools, they're fake developer tools. They're not really developer tools. They're security tools that integrate into the development pipeline. They're not.
And what's the matter with that, though? Why? I don't think we should hide that.
Yeah, I think it's an evolution that you're saying right now. Listen, I think that few years from now, probably when we talk again, it's going to be much better. And you're starting to see that. The company we acquired was exactly that. I remember going to our CEO and I said, listen, the technology is really cool, but I'll tell you one thing. Developers love this thing. They just love using it. They prefer using it than not using it because they think it will create problems if they don't use it, right? And it's so much fun for them. And that thing, building stuff that they love, not stuff that you love and you're forcing down their throat, or something that you love or you're condescending and say, hey, I gave you this thing. Just run the scan, please, dude. Run the scan. And why are you asking questions? Just run the scan. You're not a security people. You're not a security person. Run the scan. Forget it.
Right. And then I'll give you the results of the scan and tell you what compliance guidelines you're not out of.
Exactly.
And they're like, you might as well be talking Greek to them.
Exactly.
Right?
Instead of telling them, hey, listen, I found a problem. This is how to fix it.
I get it, man.
Yeah, so I think that's an evolution. But I think the interesting thing is, and that's what the survey brought up. And again, for your audience that wants to read it, you mentioned where to find it. But I think the interesting thing is that you're seeing that mindset of developer first, or at least DevSecOps, let's say. Let's start with shifting left, is taking a huge priority. And I think the interesting part is, like I mentioned, that you're seeing organizations starting to say, hey, in my application security program, in the next 12 months, I'm going to put most of my effort in the left. Now, did they figure out already what does left mean, how to build it developer friendly? No, that's going to be a journey. But the focus from right, production, stopping, attacks, whatever, to get to more preventative mode in the left, you're starting to see that, which is, I think, encouraging, right? It's encouraging. Yeah. It's not there, it's encouraging. And I agree your point about security people. I'm telling you, I did a presentation in our CPX. It's a checkpoint event a couple of years ago before COVID. And I literally said for the because it's mostly security people in the audience, said, if you take one thing from my presentation right now, right? My session, when you go back to your organization, find the developers you're working with, give them a big hug,
take them out for some beer and pizza, man.
And say, I'm sorry, I was condescending, I didn't get you. Give him a big hug and say, let's spend the day. I just want to know how your day looks like, a day in your life, so I know how to enable you to do the right thing, right?
In DevOps, we call that empathy, right?
You got to empathize.
Exactly.
Man.
Hey, TJ, we're about out of time, but let me real quickly. People want to download this report, pages.checkpoint.com/2022-cloud-security-report. Download the report, check it out. TJ, I wish we had an hour to talk, but we don't.
Always.
But we'll have you on soon. We'll continue the conversation.
Looking forward to it. Bye.
TJ Gonen, VP Cloud Security of Checkpoint. Excuse me, here on Techstrong TV. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
All right, we're back, everybody. Next up, we've got the Haunted Hacker podcast. As I said before, this is part 2 of a 2-part conversation host Mike Jones is having with Jonathan Scott, who is a security researcher and privacy advocate, and Hector Santiago, who is with the Cyber Defense Services. And they have a conversation that is one for the books, guys, talking about everything from diversity and breaking the mold in cybersecurity to the negative impact of social media and so much more. So let's go ahead and roll it now.
This guy's got like over 120,000 followers, super well respected, and telling me, you better think about releasing this, right? He said, yes, people have been using this to for phone repair, tech and tactics, but what you created is a weapon. And he said it in a public tweet to me. And so what I actually created was I created a portable wiper. So I got a Raspberry Pi, and then, the prototype is kind of raw. So, an OTG adapter, and then on plugin for any Samsung device, boom, wiped, boom, you're wiped, boom, you're wiped. And people are like, oh, what the fuck? Nobody cares about this. You're stupid. You're an idiot. You're a fraud. You're stupid. You're a goddamn idiot. And I'm like, you're a fucking idiot. Because let me tell you why. You ever heard of juice jacking? You ever been outside of your fucking house and actually plugged into a goddamn USB port in an airport? You ever gone to a public charging station outside of the United States? you're the fucking idiot. And so, I mean, it gets me all worked up because I'm like, you don't get it. If I can put it on a Raspberry Pi, we can put this on a Pico Pi, and then we can put that on a Nano Pi. And then from there, we can put it on just a freaking chip. Mm-hmm. And then we could put it in a public charging station. And then Samsung was like, well, this is allowed because, there's a passcode on the device and you can't get past the passcode. And I said, let me tell you this. And I gamed it out for them. And I actually did the proof of concept. And I said, I'm gonna put this on a timer. And so by the time that you're in your public charging station and you plug in the device, I already recognized that you're plugged in, right? And I showed them the code, I showed them the video, right? Because that's what they wanted. And I said, so while you're browsing your phone, unlocked, right? You're unlocked, your passcode's not on there. Boom, you're wiped. That's it. And they're like, well, this is fair use. This is how there's a passcode on the device. I'm like, but here's the thing. I bypassed your access controls because if you're trying to wipe, right, it's going to you have to go into reset factory settings. You have to, if you're manually doing it properly, I bypassed that. Right. But here's the deal. This is an engineering function that has been out for 13 years. Yeah. They recognize it. They know it. And so I asked some help from some friends in Korea because in the United States, and, in other, Western countries, we don't appreciate these kinds of things as much as that. That's their daily driver over there. Mm-hmm. Samsung, LG, that's their daily driver. And when they found out about this, they went crazy. When they actually found out what my CVEs were for, they went crazy. In America, they're like, "You're a fraud. You probably stole that. You get your goddamn." And I'm like, and over there, they're like, "Holy shit! How do we stop this?" So right. I was consulting. I consulted with South Korea. I consulted with Ecuador, who another country that's really heavily uses LG phones, and they said, "How can we stop this?" Because here's the thing, like LG only patched a couple of models, but this has been out, and the CVE says from Android version 1.0 to 10.0 for every single LG tablet and phone in the entire world, we can data wipe and we can backdoor to get authorized Android ADB access without you ever knowing. Yep. And so all these other countries besides the US, the US, I mean, Twitter is not the whole US, but they think they are. They think they are, right? But it's like the necessary evil, right? But yeah, so it's like, wait a second, this is really affecting people. And for people to say no one cares about your wiper, it's ridiculous. It's like you have literally never been outside of your basement, right? And the world works like this. I mean, sometimes you really do need to go to a public charging, or you're in the airport sitting there and there's a USB port right next to the chair that you're in. Come on, guys. Or even on the plane. On the plane. Yes. Right. They're like, yeah, plug in. We offer USB, and then it's like, wait a second. Come on. I saw, what I saw real quick. I saw today someone's Twitter, and it was, they were showing a video. I think it was in like McKinney, Texas, and that someone had placed a faceplate over one of those VeriSign pads, at a gas station. And that faceplate, you can punch in your key code. It allowed you to still swipe, but that faceplate on the back of it was transmitting all those codes back, and it was literally an exact like smack replica, just sat right on top of it, and the attendant pulled it off, and she was like, "What the hell is this?" And I'm just like, you think that this can't you think that this is not happening now? Like, juice jacking has been around for almost a decade. Yeah. And if people don't know what that is, like, that's literally plugging in your device into a public charging station and stealing all your data. That's juice jacking. It's been around for over a decade. And if you don't think that, it blew my mind. Anyways, I got all worked up about it. But yeah, so it was something like novel that someone hadn't seen. So no one had created a wiper like this until I made it. But when I finally showed it, they're like, "You're an idiot. No one's going to use that." So it's almost the reverse of slurping, right? So I remember we used to create the USBs that you would plug it into a laptop and it would automatically grab everything from specific directories, slurping.
So juicing is the same thing. It's just reversed.
Yeah.
And so what I find really interesting, right? We talk about Twitter and we talk about, how people react to certain things, and the disconnect and the combat that goes on social media when someone comes up with an idea or when somebody finds a vulnerability, and everybody wants to discredit that person or make that person look bad. I don't understand that. I'll never understand that. Instead of trying to discredit people, why not work with those people and figure out what they're talking about, give them a chance to talk, and give credit to what they're doing, because that makes us stronger as an industry. Instead of, we have a lot of people who want to be George Clooney's of cybersecurity, right? They want to be they want to be the person, but we don't need that. I mean, what point does that serve? What purpose is that? But when we work together, like you and I have talked about several different things that we're working on, and we toss ideas off each other. And that's the way that it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be knowledge share and collaboration, not this combat where, what you're doing is wrong. Or that shit really pisses me off. And that's what we've come to in this industry is people are fighting to get a name in the industry. And by putting people down, they think that makes them look better. And it just destroys the concept. Right. And I just, to be honest with you, Twitter is just an absolute acid pot. Like, I hate even going there sometimes because all I see is people flaming each other. Just recently, I was going to speak at a conference in Atlanta, and we had, a bunch of speakers lined up, and the people that I speak for are always diverse. You know me, Jonathan. I've always had diversity on my show. I make a point to get everybody a voice.
Yep.
But the people that were organizing the conference looked at the speaker list and realized that there was no diversity. But that wasn't their fault. They opened it up for speakers, and those are the people who put themselves forward to speak. And, we had to really work hard at the end to try to, figure out what we're going to do. And in the end, we thought, the CEO took a step forward and said, look, we're just going to postpone this event until we can get a very diverse selection of people, because that's what we believe in. But you would not believe the amount of flame that was going on about that situation. And here's a group of people. The co-host of the show is female, and it's like, what do you mean? It wasn't meant. It's not like they organized a group of people and said, okay, here's what we're going to do, guys. We're going to have a conference with nothing but white male speakers. That doesn't happen. We don't do that. But that's what our industry has come to. If you don't show that diversity, even though, it's not intended to be that way, people get all upset. And I just, I wanted to focus on that a little bit because of the fact that our industry has gotten so volatile towards certain people over the past 10 years that it just really disgusts me. And that's why I always make a point to promote people, right? I do a lot with, Black Girls Hack, and I do a lot for that community. I do a lot for every diversity I can possibly embrace, because I know what it's like to be that niche or that not accepted in a certain industry. And I think as an industry, we need to pull together. I mean, look at our panel right here. We have enough diversity, to fuel anybody's conversation. And that's the way it should be. But if that doesn't happen, it doesn't mean we have to step up and fight each other. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
I think too, when it comes to the technical aspect of things first, right? I want to address that is that there's this kind of this hierarchy of InfoSec people that have been to like DEF CON for the past 10 years. And then they think that they're like run the show and that they're the ones that actually know exactly what an RCE is, right? Like most people can't even define an RCE, right? So an RCE is what they think is an RCE, right? And even if other people say that that's not an RCE, what doesn't matter, because you haven't been to DEF CON for 10 years, and it's silly, right? It's literally silly. And it's the most asinine thing about Twitter. It's like when someone says experts have said that you're wrong. What do you think? What about you? Like who's and it's like, well, that experts, and it's like it's this broken record. And it's like, who's the expert?
Right.
and then you never get to them. You never find them. You never actually, and it's just like, so it was funny because, you know, like you and I were talking about, Mike, is like the more memes and the more fake Jonathan Scott accounts that you make on Twitter, the worse it is for you. Right. Literally, like you're making it worse. If you're actually trying to make a claim against me, you're literally killing your claim. And other people are actually telling the trolls, you know, you're making it worse, right? Like they're like, we actually have a claim. We actually have something that he's a fraud. And they're like, but you're literally making it worse by like threatening my wife's life or like stalking my family or posting like bullshit, like whatever, making rap videos about me. Like, why are people going to believe anyone? Right. Yeah. So I talked to some media and some pretty big media. And they asked me, they said, well, why are people saying this about you? And I sent them like, just leave it alone. If you want to watch the rap video, it's fine, you know, but you know, it's kind of one of those things. And so, you know, they're still going to interview me because this is what it's come to, right? You're literally killing whatever it is that you're trying to do by you're making it worse. But here's the thing. Again, there's still that gatekeeping. No, that's not a vulnerability. No, that's not an issue. Why not? Because I said it's not. And that's that. And I'm like, you know, we're the same age, right? Like, you know, you're a millennial. I'm a millennial. I'm 30. You know, we're both 35 and you know, we're both in high positions in companies and I'm not like, you know, you're my peer. I'm not a student of yours. Like, you know, that let's get this real, right? Like this is what's up. And it's just funny like that. Now the diversity thing's really funny too. And this was really interesting because, you know, I had a troll trying to start up like, oh, well, you hate Hispanics. You hate Mexican culture. Like, you know, I'm Hispanic, right? Like I got a white last name, but my family's Hispanic. Like, what are you talking about? Like, you don't that makes no sense. Right? Like, oh, you can't say that you like frijoles. You can't say frijoles like that. Why? Because you're culturally appropriating that word, and I'm like, you're kidding me, right? Like that's how I was raised, right? frijoles, come at me.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm from Texas too. We call it frijoles. I'm from Texas.
Come on.
I call it habichuelas.
There you go, habichuelas. Right?
Yeah, it's just that's how it is. And
that's how it is. Arroz con habichuelas, right?
And I don't even know you guys though, but like honestly, I don't even get on Twitter. I do have an account on Twitter, but I probably got on it like last year. And my background too is different. I'm like military. I spent 20 years in the military, so
yeah, me too.
Oh, so you know how the whole diversity in the military is like you just.
It's forced diversity. It's forced diversity in the military.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
I'm not gonna lie. I'm still exploring the whole civilian world, really, because it's just weird. And it's just like Jonathan said, like if you do something real good, then you get attacked. Mm-hmm. Yes, that's for some reason, or if a certain company, some of the companies, the only thing you have to do, if you want to look at a certain company, you want to work at a certain company, look at their diversity. And by looking, you can tell if it's like, oh, this company probably going to give somebody else opportunity, or this company, you can kind of sense that stuff. People don't really get that, you know?
Well, and Twitter is a bad place to begin with, because the people who have influence, right? People that are Twitter influencers, it's almost like they go and look for things to blame people about, just so they can get that horde, that mob mentality going, and get the pitchforks and the tiki torches going, you know? And it pisses me off. Man. So you remember when I got attacked, right? And it was guys from a group that I used to be with, and here they are like, oh, he's not from this group. We don't know who he is. And I'm like, wait a minute. Let's put this in perspective, right? You're taking a whole entire show of your podcast to spend on who I am. So that makes me important, right? So I must be somebody in your eyes, right? And so I talked to a lot of people about that. And it was funny. Like, everybody who has gotten to the level that I think that we're all at, right? You know, we're all getting that same type of attention sometimes. And I think what happens is when you get to a certain level, there's always going to be those people who want to get to that level, but don't want to work to get there. So they try to take you down. And by doing that, they think that's going to put them where you were at. But the problem is it doesn't work that way. We put in a lot of hours, a lot of knowledge, and spend a lot of time with a lot of people, helping people to get where we're at. I didn't get here because I stepped on a lot of people. I got here because I help people. And I continue to do it. Continue to give people a voice and a platform they can speak from. And there's always going to be those people that have that envy, right? That success envy that want to take you down. And Twitter, man, you talked about like the DEF CON guys who've gone there for like 20, 30 years, whatever, that, you know, stir up these hate mobs. You know, and same with all groups. And it really just, I don't understand it. And that's that mob mentality that I just don't get. It's like they get off and they're happy about putting someone in an uncomfortable position and putting a bunch of people against them, to the point where I've seen people ran off the internet and people close their accounts because they can't deal with the trolls. But I refuse that shit. Like come at me and I'm just going to ignore you until you're done. And I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, I saw that with a reporter, actually, a reporter that interviewed me. And it's funny because even like professionals were telling this Twitter mob, what's the problem with what Jonathan interviewed with this reporter? Like, what's the issue? Like, literally, why are you? And like, well, it's disinformation. It's like, no, it's not. Like what Jonathan said was not. Like, we're talking about like legit professionals that are like have established names telling these people, why are you giving this reporter a hard time? And, you know, but they're just like, you know what, you're probably in on it with him. And it's just like, come on.
It's a conspiracy.
Yeah. But it's what's funny is that people say, so I started blocking everybody because I was like, you know what, I don't need this bullshit. Like my feeds were so filled with just bullshit. Hey, and I'm like, people can't actually see the message. So I started blocking and hiding the replies. People are saying, oh, well, you're just making an echo chamber. And I'm like, you know what? Let me tell you something. If you're going into a mega church and you're screaming in a mega church, I love the devil. You know, the devil is real and inside of me. What the hell do you think is going to happen? You're going to get kicked out because that echo chamber is what people want to hear. Right. That's why people are in that giant echo chamber. And that's why they're listening to Joel Osteen, because they want to listen to the message. And you know what? I don't have a problem blocking. And fuck everybody that says you should not block them because you're creating. No, fuck you, because I'm trying to get my message out and these trolls are stopping. So come into my church if you want to hear my message. And if you're going to cause a problem in my church, you're going to be taken out. And I don't have a problem, you know?
Have you ever gone to Twitter and reported people? Because I have.
Yeah.
And Twitter always responds with, this doesn't violate our code of conduct. And I'm like, okay, really? So you're telling me that someone harassing me is okay? And when you report to Twitter, either you don't get a response or you get a big fuck you. And people continue.
This guy recently, he was saying all kinds of horrible, nasty things to the extent where Twitter actually suspended his account. And so he created another account and he says, this fraud, Jonathan Scott, got my other Twitter account suspended. He got my other Twitter account suspended. So this is my new one. And he had like 2,000 followers, something like that. And he's like, and so anyways, I found his account and I blocked him again. And because Twitter's nasty. Like if they block you first, they can still post on your feed. Nasty little thing. Right. Nasty little thing that they do. But anyway, so yeah, actually, you know, I reported this person because they were saying like vulgar things. Like you can harass and you can make your memes and your remixes and whatever, but don't start saying nasty stuff. Like just, you know, I'm not, this is not how I even roll in real life. Right. Like I'm not going to talk like it was like a 16-year-old kid, like that kind of dirty, nasty, you know, shit. You know, I'm not down with it. So anyways, he got his account suspended, but everyone else, same thing. It doesn't violate our rules. You can talk about, you know, whatever the hell you want ever, you know?
Yeah. Well, you look at Twitter and the way that they reacted to, let's say, different political parties. and they're definitely politicized, right? They're very, very liberal when it comes to that.
Definitely, they're left. They're super left.
And when you watch,
I'm not even on Twitter, and I know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
and when you
probably the reason why I'm not verified is because I'm not left.
Yeah,
and
exactly. And when you watch,
I don't even bother with it anymore. Like, fuck it, I'll never get verified.
No, and when you watch what they did with like the Taliban and allowed the Taliban to continue having an account on Twitter, and the same thing with Putin, still had an account on Twitter, but what happened to the Republicans? Let's take Trump for instance. Where is his Twitter account now? So here's a social media platform that's supposed to be for everyone, right? For the people, but they're definitely politicized, and they definitely allow people to troll. I mean, it's black and white. They do it every day. I can't count how many people I had to report when I got attacked, and nobody got affected. And I thought, if this doesn't violate your code of conduct, then I don't know what does, because I've gotten direct threats. I've had, threats of physical, harm to myself or to people around me, but they allowed that shit.
Yep.
And it was like, wait a minute, and we wonder why kids get bullied and why kids commit suicide, because they get bullied on the internet, because jackasses like Twitter allow that to happen, because they're politicized, and they want that kind of disconnect and that kind of friction, because it fuels their platform.
Well, it seems like they want people to make more accounts to make it seem like, oh, we have like all these users, and I'm like, do you know how many people I block a day that have made like 0 followers, 0 following, like no picture, just account created today, and yeah, exactly, and I'm just like, what the hell? I mean, to the extent where I was like, what the hell is it? There was a guy. He was super drunk. He was super, super drunk one day and just talking all kinds of bullshit to me in DMs and talking about my wife and this and this. And I'm like, okay, whatever, and then finally he's like, I do this for a living. And I was like, what do you do? He's like, I spam. And he's like, yeah, he's literally admitted to me that he's a spammer for hire. That's his full-time job. And I'm like, I guess, I mean, if you're good at it, whatever, do your thing. Right. But like, that's thanks for like confirming, what everybody's like, no, this isn't real. This is not spam farms. Like, it's like all, it's all like QAnon bullshit, you're reading. I'm like, no, this is real. Like, if you go to, there's a site called I think it's called Player Up. Mm-hmm. You can buy a verified Twitter account for $2,500, and it has like 40,000 followers, and it's got like, a great reputation score on it, and you can buy it, and they just keep making them. Like there's just, and it's legit. These are legit. I mean, we're talking like there's 2 verified accounts for Bored Apes. So these Bored Apes, they said that they were the co-founders. They're not the co-founders. They were literally sending you to, like literally a place where they can just steal your money, and people started stealing the money. And I posted, hey, don't click on this. They're fake. That's not the actual co-founders of the Bored Apes. Don't click on it. They've stolen $18,000 so far. I've actually traced it out. And of course the trolls come behind me and they're like, oh, you're an idiot. 18,000. You have the weakest posts ever. You don't have any sort of like you don't have substantial content. Like, wow, I'm like, why did you have the need? Like, I'm trying to help people. Like, people are getting scammed. But then again, if it's affecting their business,
right,
that's where it comes into play. And here's one last thing. I was told in a Twitter space that one of the reasons why I was getting trolled so hard for the CVEs that I got and saying, oh, it's not real, it's fake, and we're going to try to get it taken down, is because there were some people that were actually making money off of this exploit. Oh. And it was, yeah. And it was funny because they were, in talking about diversity, these are females that create malware. That's what they do for a living. Like they're badasses making malware and using these exploits, to get paid. And so it trickled down and said, yeah, these women are pissed off at you because you've taken part of their revenue stream by this patch. And I was like, well, first off, that's badass. That's pretty.
That is pretty pimp.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. I mean, honestly, it's like Marcus Hutchins and I kind of get into it, but I think he's pretty fucking awesome. Like, honestly, I think he's really fucking awesome. We have our back and forth, but I think he's really cool at what he does. Just malware development in itself is pretty amazing. Whatever you do with your life, that's your life. Not for me to judge, but the point is that's one of the things that was upsetting them was that they lost a revenue stream. So
destroying their business model.
a little bit, have to kind of rethink things.
Yeah. That's kind of why I'm sitting on that one exploit that I've been working on for so long. I've got the NDA going and I can't really talk about it, but it's one of those things where I sat on it for a while and I thought I could just release this and watch the world go to smoke. But
definitely with what you got.
You were talking about building a weapon, and it rang in my head. I was like, wait a minute, I had this conversation before. And the power, I think another thing that attracts me to it too is the amount of power that you sit on with those types of exploits and vulnerabilities. I haven't let it eat me up, but trust me, knowing that I have that leverage is definitely something I wake up in the morning and I feel good about myself because I do have that leverage in my pocket. But again, it could toast the world if I released it. So I just, I'm doing the right thing and trying to, keep it quiet until I have the talk with the guys in suits. Guys, 100%. It has been a fantastic fucking podcast. I really enjoyed it. It was more of a panel discussion, I think. And I think that, I want to do more of these in the future because, I want to have leaders and people who push the envelope on the podcast and not just, personalities. I want to have real movers and shakers. And I think you guys represent exactly what that is. Any last thoughts before we go? Jonathan, start with you. Any last thoughts?
Oh man, it's always a pleasure to be on your podcast. I love it. It's super cool. Looking forward to the next one.
I appreciate it, Jonathan. Hector, anything, last thoughts?
Well, no, just for everybody out there trying to get into the field, nothing is going to come to you for free. Nothing for free, meaning that you don't have to pay. For free, meaning that you have to do the work. And Jonathan, it's a pleasure to meet you. And hopefully, I'm going to stay in touch with you. And if you ever need anything, or if anybody out there listening need anything, just holla,
Cool.
I appreciate everything.
Absolutely. So I just want people to be nice to each other. The documentary I did today, the taping was really kind of impactful. It was about kids and how we need to look out for the next generations. And I think what we're doing on this podcast and what we're doing as individuals is doing just that. So keep doing what you're doing, guys. I really appreciate it. And with that, I'll go ahead and end this one and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks, guys.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
All right, next up, we've got our Something Old segment. This is from the recent Predict 2022 virtual conference. This is a presentation by Micah Silverman, who is the Director of DevSecOps Acceleration at Snyk. Micah has a presentation titled Log4Shell Deep Dive, Live Debugging Log4j. At the time that Predict was first aired, Log4Shell had just kind of hit the headlines, and a lot of organizations were scrambling on how to mitigate the risk. Well, Micah actually walks you through it, and if your organization is still struggling with the Log4Shell vulnerability, or if you just want to make sure you got it all, definitely want to check out this presentation. Let's roll it now.
Hello and welcome. My name is Micah Silverman, and I am Director of Acceleration for Sneak. Now, what that means is that I produce and do a lot of workshops, and I run a team that does a lot of workshops as well to raise awareness for security vulnerabilities. Today, I'm going to be talking about the Log4Shell vulnerability and exploit that was discovered about a month ago and kind of set the internet on fire. And you may be wondering why I have this background of code shown here. And that's because the highlighted line, this humble single line, is the root of what has led to this big exploit. Now, in case you're not aware of it, this is a level 10 exploit, which is as high as we go. We don't go to 11 like Spinal Tap. What a level 10 exploit is an active exploit that can result in a remote code execution. So it's really the highest one that we have because it could lead to a complete takeover of servers or your machines that are vulnerable. So before we jump into the code, we're gonna ultimately end up doing a code deep dive to really see this exploit in action. But before we do that, let's get a little bit of background on how we arrived here at the situation where a single line of code could cause so much trouble. What demonstration wouldn't be complete without a poorly drawn diagram? So here's the one that I've put together, and this is the anatomy of Log4Shell. Now, there's a lot going on here, and we're gonna break it down into pieces, but the root of all of this, you may have heard by now, it really relies on Jindy, the Java Naming and Directory Interface, in conjunction with LDAP, the Lightweight Directory Access Protocol. So we're going to come back to this diagram in just a moment to go through each of its individual parts, but let's take a look at how we arrived at this place. How did this pile of network calls get into Log4j in the first place? And maybe this is a good time to take a step back. In case you're not aware, Log4j is a simple logger that's widely used for Java programs. That is, over the course of your application, you may want to log information. It could be stats, it could be errors, it could be warnings. It's a very common use case, and what Log4j allows us to do is to write out to the console, to write out to files, even to write logs directly to databases or to use other services in order to publish these log files. So to understand a little bit of what's going on here, let's take a look at, let's jump in a time machine and go back to 2013. And this is where support for JNDI, Jindy lookups, was first introduced into Log4j. And one thing I want to point out here, this is kind of the double-edged sword of open source that developers like myself deal with every day. Open source gives us this platform that in the past we didn't have. If I'm a contributor to an open source project, I can make a request. I can say, hey, I have this use case, and I'd like to put this functionality. And in fact, I can even write that functionality myself. And looking here in 2013, we had this use case, this request that was made. And, you know, maybe in hindsight, maybe we can say, well, this isn't really a great use case, or it isn't really going to be a widely used use case. But back in 2013, this was a humble request. It was reviewed. A bunch of people reviewed it, and a patch was made to go and say, okay, we'll support this feature in Log4j. And the rest is kind of history now, but this goes all the way back to 2013. And, you know, no shade to either the requester for this feature or to the person or persons that approved and ultimately integrated the feature. This is what happens with open source. And it's kind of shown or demonstrated by the fact that this has been sitting dormant since 2013. This exploit has existed now in Log4j 8 or 9 years ago. Now, if we fast forward 3 years, at Black Hat 2016, there was this great presentation talking specifically about the combination of Jindy and LDAP being problematic. And what's interesting is that this didn't involve Log4j at all, but it has two of the three components that contributed to what we now know as Log4Shell. It's talking about Jindy and LDAP and how you can use some special LDAP responses to trick Java into doing something that you probably didn't intend, or trick Java into a remote code execution. So that's Jindy and LDAP together. And what's interesting is that at this point in Log4j, this very exploit was sitting dormant for 3 years at this point. And these presenters weren't even talking about Log4j. They were talking about a more general issue with the combination of Jindy and LDAP. Now, in the world of Java, we love our exploits, or I should say we love our abstractions. And so Log4j supports a number of different abstractions. Maybe you want to write your logs to the console, or maybe you want to write to the database. So the Java naming and directory interface is a Java abstraction that allows us to look up different types of directories. So DNS, for instance, the domain naming service, is a type of directory, and LDAP is another type of directory. Rather than having to write specific code for each type of directory, we use Jindy to give us a more generalized access and lookup mechanism. So where this all starts, where this exploit all starts, is in providing a string that looks like this. And if you're not familiar with it, what we're looking at here is a string that gets interpolated. That's what the $ in the curly braces gives us. So beginning with Jindy as an identifier, this triggers the Jindy mechanism. It then takes the rest of the URL here, the LDAP request, and that triggers a network call to this endpoint that was specified. Now, in and of itself, this is pretty normal behavior, but what this LDAP request returns is a special type of response that includes a redirect to an HTTP endpoint. So now we have another technology involved, which Jindy is familiar with, how to make an HTTP request. Jindy goes right ahead and makes this HTTP request, which results in a byte array response, which is this evil class, and it's just a serialized Java class. Finally, Jindy knows how to deserialize, so it deserializes that Java class, and now it goes and executes it, and mayhem ensues. So from whatever the kind of humble use case was for including Jindy, we got from there all the way over to this remote code execution because of the mechanism of all of these moving parts put together. Now, it may not be entirely clear what's going on just yet, so let's take a look. We'll dive into the code. And one thing I want you to put a pin in and remember, and I'm going to come back to, is that this evil class is not even in the class path of my app. It doesn't even belong, or it doesn't exist in that class path, but because of the nature of how Java can deserialize classes, that's how we get into this kind of trouble. Okay, so right at the top, I had a GitHub repo highlighted, and now we're actually going to look at that code in action. This is a series of repositories that we have. Let me get to the right screen. Here we go. So this is called Java Goof, and we use these Goof repos to do a lot of types of demonstrations. And just recently, we added the Log4Shell section. And if you notice, it's broken up into two Maven modules. There's a client and there's a server. And there's a bunch of different ways to run it and to see this example in action. We're going to go through it in a particular way here. And one of the things that I want to point out, if we look over here on the left, you'll notice that this evil class is part of the Log4Shell server module. If we take a look at the Log4Shell client module, you'll see that the only thing there is this main class. Evil is not on this class path. That's a point I'm going to keep coming back to, and it's important because it exemplifies the nature of this exploit where we're sending back Java classes that aren't even on the class path and can, do anything, as we're going to see in just a minute. All right, so where we're going to start is with the server, and the server is a lean little bit of code whose only purpose in life is to respond to LDAP requests and HTTP requests. You can see there's a setup LDAP method and there's a setup HTTP method. Now, these are not fully functioning LDAP or HTTP servers. Their only point in life is to respond to certain requests in a certain way. Let me fire up that server. And now if you look down here in the terminal, you can see that we have an LDAP server that's listening on port 9999 and an HTTP server that's listening on port 8000. That's the server piece. But let's get into the main event and take a look at what our main is doing here. And the first thing it's going to do is show some Java stats, just some information about your running JDK, because the nature of this exploit requires certain settings and certain JVM versions in order to run. And at the end, I'm going to show you some resources where you can get all the information about which JVM versions and which property settings you would need to have in order for this to all work. The very first thing it does, it gets a hold of a log4j logger instance up here. And then the very first thing it does is just a normal, uninteresting logger output, just to show that the logger is working. It has this method called check temp. Because this is a standalone, fully functional running example, and what we're going to demonstrate here and prove is that a remote code execution can happen and that it's going to write a file to the temp folder. Now, that's what this particular example does. In reality, if you are actually running a vulnerable server, anything could be run. It could erase your whole hard drive, or it could exfiltrate your passwords folder, or it could make a remote connection to a listening server and copy all of your files over. So that's the nature of remote code executions, is that it could really do anything. For the purposes of demonstration, we're just going to take a look for this temp file. And at this point, the temp file should not exist. So this is kind of our starting state. And if you want to run this demonstration on your own, you should remember to remove the temp file at the end of it, because if the temp file is there, the application is going to fail at this point because the preconditions aren't set up properly. Now, here's the main event, and I've set a number of breakpoints so that we can go in and look and see all of the inner workings of what's happening here. So this is where we're going to trigger the exploit. It's going to write a file, so we're just going to give it a beat to make sure that the file gets written to the file system. And now the temp file should exist. So if it all runs correctly, it's going to check for the existence of that temp file. It should be there now, and that will prove, this is the proof of concept that the exploit worked. Now, the exploit was first discovered with JDK 8. So that was an initial requirement, but soon after it was discovered that the exploit was problematic in other versions and other scenarios. And so the big punchline here is that this JNDI lookup facility has been completely removed from Log4j. So if you upgrade to the latest version of Log4j, the JNDI lookup that we're going to debug in just a moment doesn't even exist in the stack anymore, because there were a couple of early attempts to work around it and to make it better, still leaving JNDI in. Because of how serious the problem was, the maintainers of Log4j decided to pull out that JNDI functionality altogether. But what I'm running here is a Java 11, because using a modern JVM, it's a lot easier to debug and to go deep. And so I'm purposely setting this trust URL code base to true, which is a very bad idea. You shouldn't do that. But for the purposes of demonstration, that's what allows this exploit to continue to work even in a newer version of the JVM. So let's go ahead and start this debugger. And I've set some very strategic breakpoints. So the very first place we land is in this JNDI lookup.java. And if we locate that, you can see that it's part of the log4j version 2.14.1. This is the very vulnerable version of log4j, which you should not be running at this point. But this is where we're at right now. And so the very first thing it's doing is it's taking this JNDI and it's going to do a lookup. So we're in JNDI lookup, and now it's going to take the rest of this string to go and do this LDAP lookup. So let's go on to the next endpoint, the next breakpoint. And if I look over in my server, I can see that at this point, the LDAP lookup has been successful, and it responded with this redirect. And if I take a look at these attributes in the LDAP lookup, you'll notice that there are these 4 attributes: object class, Java code base, Java factory, Java class name. So this is where we run into trouble with the combination of JINDI and LDAP. Because if we look at these values, the Java code base reference is a remote reference. This is what enables, or this is the mechanism by which it triggers JINDI to go and do this lookup on a remote reference and get back this evil class. So to be clear, the LDAP response is not where the problem originates. This is like a reference once removed, but now JINDI is going to happily go ahead and make this HTTP request just by virtue of the fact that this is the LDAP response that we got back. So let's continue on. All right, once again, we're just looking at these attributes here. It's about to go and resolve that, right? So we haven't yet made the HTTP call, but we're about to. And now at this point, no, I lied, still not there. Let me hop over this. So here we're going to get object factory from reference. That's a JINDI method, and this is going to actually make the HTTP call. There it is. And we sent back a class byte array result. So the HTTP call was made, the byte array was sent back, and that was deserialized into this factory object. And if we take a look, you'll notice that this factory object is now a type of evil object. And again, I want to come back to the point that evil is not in the class path of this application, but it was returned and deserialized. And this IDE environment, IntelliJ, is smart enough to resolve this evil class because it's in a different module in the same project, but that evil class is still not in the class path. So the next thing it's going to do is it's going to call the get object instance of this factory object. Well, let's trace into that and see what's going to happen. Now we're in this evil class, this instance of this evil class, and here we can see what evil is actually doing. So when the proper use of get object instance is to ultimately return an object. In this case, we're just returning null because we don't care. We just want to do some damage. And if we look, it's composing a command that's going to launch an interactive shell. And in this case, it's just going to echo the word pwned to a file in temp called pwned, and it's going to call the exec command. In Java, Java runs in a JVM. It's a sandbox. You may have heard of it before. But when you call exec, it reaches out to the enclosing operating system. And it doesn't matter if it's Windows or Mac or Linux. It reaches out to that operating system and it runs the command specified by this array. In this case, a shell command. So now if I let this run to its conclusion, we can see the output, you've been pawned. And if we take a look at the terminal here, we can see that there's this pawned file now in the temp folder. So that's kind of the proof of concept that this exploit has, in fact, actually worked. All right, now I don't want to leave you with just the exploit because remediation is important, especially with a level 10 exploit. So let's take a look at some resources that we have here. First of all, this was the original CVE that kind of kicked all this off and led to, let's see, what was it? 3 different releases of Log4j that that resulted in, so far, a fix that's held. And this is an important point about vulnerabilities and disclosure and discovery. And that is, in the world of open source, we respond to these things very quickly. That's the good news. The bad news is that we also discover new vectors of attack very quickly. And so over the course of the last month, there's been no fewer than 3 separate releases of Log4j, each time trying to address this problem in the best way. And each time somebody or a company found out a new exploit and it was responded to very quickly. So that leads to a lot of kind of thrashing around inside tech organizations. But the good news is that because of the focus that's put on this big a problem, it gets resolved very quickly. So this is the original CVE. Then if you go over to Sneak's blog, we have a whole section that just focuses on Log4Shell. And we put up a lot of really good posts and a lot of really good resources. And one of the main ones that I want to point out is the Log4Shell remediation cheat sheet. Now, the big punchline here, number 1, is to upgrade to the latest version of Log4j, which is 2.17.1. But there's a bunch of different other approaches on this cheat sheet. First of all, discovering all of the places in your application that you may have the Log4j dependency. This can be tricky because it might be hidden in dependencies of other dependencies. So you want to find out where you have Log4j, make sure all the versions are updated, and you may be in a situation where you need to wait. Maybe you can't just go and update your server and restart. Maybe you need to wait for an applicable window of downtime. There's a bunch of other approaches that you can take to at least make yourself less vulnerable in the short term until you can update that version. So this cheat sheet is a really good resource. Also, if you are a non-developer or work with other non-developers, there's a blog post that I made that is for non-developers, and it kind of goes into the problem and how it can be exploited and what you can do about it. And it's explicitly for either non-developers or for developers that aren't necessarily Java developers. And then lastly, and probably the most useful resource is under the Sneak Labs GitHub organization. We set up this awesome Log4Shell repo, and this has links to everything that I was just talking about. It also has links to videos. It's even got memes. What kind of world event wouldn't be complete without some memes? So that's a really great resource for you also. All right, so I will leave you there. I hope you found this useful and informative. You can always find us on Twitter at SneakSec, SNYKSEC, and happy hacking.
Hey, everybody. Happy Monday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the headlines. First on DevOps.com is an article that looks at designing DevOps ecosystems for multi-cloud environments. As companies grow and expand to become global enterprises, IT infrastructure inevitably becomes more complex. When it comes to cloud computing, that usually means maintaining multiple clouds. There are many reasons for using different cloud services providers, some by choice and others by mandate. Regardless of the reason, enterprise IT leaders and DevOps teams in particular need to think strategically about multi-cloud environments and design their software delivery ecosystem from the outset to accommodate a multi-cloud strategy. An effective multi-cloud DevOps strategy is essential for allowing businesses to easily scale application delivery across many different cloud assets and is therefore vital for enterprises operating globally. This article offers up 6 best practices for organizations to consider to create an effective strategy. And we look at some essential ingredients for successful remote DevOps teams. Tracking the performance of the DevOps team has become more challenging in a remote and hybrid world. Like everyone else, developers have become remote workers because of the pandemic, which means adapting to a new way of working. But there are some things organizations can do to ensure teams are successful no matter where they are. From choosing the right collaboration platforms and procedures to understanding the key metrics to monitor developer productivity. This article outlines some of the things that organizations can do to ensure their DevOps teams remain as efficient as the applications they create. In news, Resilion has integrated its workload analysis tool with GitLab's CI framework, part of an effort to make it easier for developers to discover issues such as vulnerabilities before they upload code into a repository. The integration will provide developers with an instant feedback loop that will enable them to address a wide range of issues before their code is ever reviewed. The Resilion platform enables developers to write code while the code analytics tool works to surface common mistakes that they can remediate as they see fit. The Unison proprietary workload composition analysis engine on which the Resilion platform is based makes it feasible to shift more responsibility for application security further left without requiring developers to become cybersecurity experts. Unison automatically creates a model of all of the applications that include the underlying infrastructure and runtime environments. It reverse engineers and maps that environment in memory to dynamically track the inventory, performance, runtime execution, exposure, and interdependencies between each piece of code and can generate a software bill of materials. All right, over on Container Journal is an article about hardening Kubernetes multi-cluster environments. Kubernetes has quickly become a de facto tool within enterprise software development, enabling DevOps engineers to scale large swaths of containers. And recent cybersecurity hardening guidelines posted by NSA and CISA indicate that Kubernetes has hit mass adoption. But the surge in adoption also can introduce many new vulnerabilities and misconfigurations, which, if unchecked, could leave many organizations at risk. Additionally, most infrastructure teams have moved on from running a single or 2 clusters to operating multiple clusters across various divisions and perhaps even across multiple clouds. Within this multi-cluster position, it becomes difficult to keep an up-to-date inventory of all Kubernetes clusters, let alone their unique frailties. This can easily result in over-permissive states that break the rule of least privilege. Increased visibility into all Kubernetes platforms and tighter role-based access control are necessary to keep cloud-native architecture safe and secure. This article reviews these top 2 concerns and explores general methods for hardening the growing complexity of today's Kubernetes adoptions. And we have the latest from Garden.io, which launched a graph-based framework to track the relationships between components as DevOps teams deliver applications in cloud-native environments running on Kubernetes clusters. The Garden.io framework is designed to enable developers to spin up remote development environments on demand, so they can both iterate while coding and run tests from anywhere. It can be deployed on either a laptop or integrated within a CI/CD platform. It was created to ease the amount of time and efforts developers waste trying to keep track of all the dependencies between all the components that make up an application environment. The next goal is to extend the reach of the Graph framework to include serverless computing platforms and provide integrations with other DevSecOps tools and software supply chain management platforms. All right, over on Security Boulevard, we look at the results of a study by Tessian that found 1 in 4 employees lost their job in the last 12 months after making a mistake that compromised their company's security. More than half of employees said they fell for a phishing email because the attacker impersonated a senior executive at their company. That's up from 41% reported in 2020. People were also susceptible to phishing attacks over SMS, also known as smishing, with 1/3 of respondents being duped by a smishing request in the last 12 months. This article looks at these and other findings from the survey, which shows that organizations need to refocus and modernize their security awareness training to help employees understand the risks in today's cloud-first world. And finally, we look at ways in which organizations can reduce the critical infrastructure risk from end-of-life software. Legacy systems, including end-of-life software, cause more problems than workflow bottlenecks and IT headaches, and could put a company, or even the nation, if that software is in support of critical infrastructure, at serious risk. The U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, keeps a list of practices that are exceptionally dangerous to critical infrastructure and national critical functions. End-of-life software tops that list. In today's cloud era, more and more organizations are migrating legacy workloads to the cloud, and the looming security risk of unpatched legacy workloads multiplies. These legacy workloads are the weak link in organizations' cloud migration journey that hackers are just waiting to exploit. The solution to the problem isn't as straightforward as the threat, however. Quickly ripping and replacing unsupported systems is unrealistic, expensive, and disruptive to business operations, and it can affect myriad other systems unexpectedly. This article outlines what organizations can do short of ripping and replacing to mitigate their risk. All right, that's it for the headlines. Please check back with me tomorrow when I'll have a fresh new batch for you. Until then, I hope everybody has a great day, and please, whatever you do, stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Techstrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here once again with Brian Brozek, who is the CISO over at Optiv Security. Brian, thank you for returning to Techstrong TV. It's great to see you.
It's great to see you and happy to be back.
All right, great. So I love this topic that we are about to discuss because it is, I'm sure, so relevant to so many organizations, and that is offboarding employees in a secure fashion. And I know that we've been talking about the Great Resignation. I call it the Great Reshuffling because people got to go somewhere, right? They're all not all just quitting. You know, they're moving to other jobs. So, but there's a lot of movement happening in the market, and employees are leaving their jobs, sometimes going to new ones, sometimes going and sitting on a mountaintop. I have no idea, but there's got to be there are security considerations that all organizations need to consider. And then with the increased number of remote employees, I would imagine the offboarding process itself is probably a little bit more difficult than were they all in the office.
A lot of moving parts, and cloud technology has made that a little more challenging as well. because it's not just one account inside your environment.
Right. I remember the days when it was basically Microsoft Active Directory. You just kind of flip the switch and they're done and that's it. But it's a whole new kettle of fish these days. So, so let's talk about some of the things that you think organizations are kind of doing wrong right now when it comes to offboarding employees. What are they missing?
So cloud applications, many times you can automate that as part of your single sign-on process. But some cloud providers, they're not allowed to do that. They don't have the technology. It may be a startup company. So those often need to be deactivated outside the automation process. So you have to chase down who the application owner is. And though there's a lot of manual steps that are easy to miss during the offboarding process.
So you guys put together a checklist. Is that right? Or you have a checklist of some of the things that you think organizations need to kind of consider when they're doing the offboarding. So let's kind of go through that a little bit, and we can maybe have little discussions about each one as we go through.
Yeah, that sounds good. So in addition to the automation process, look for those SaaS applications that may be a one-off from your process, and make sure that you have automated alerts. Person gets terminated or they leave, an email should get sent out to some of the application owners to check, their local password file for that account. That's one way to streamline that a little bit. Other areas that get challenging are application accounts. You may have a shared account where you're all part of a group. And if one member of that group leaves, well, they know that password, so you're going to have to change that and send that out to all the employees that, hey, there's a new password for this shared account. So you need to keep an eye on that. A common problem area that a lot of people don't think about are contractors, supplemental labor. A lot of companies manage employees in an HR database, but sometimes contractors and supplemental labor are managed out of purchasing or some other organization. And so they're not part of that automated flow. So I've seen that a number of times.
That's really interesting. I don't think a lot of organizations really do think about that. We have a password manager that we use in our organization, and I know that's been super helpful especially for those groups that you mentioned. Having to change the password for the entire group, and that seems to be easy enough to do through a password manager. And folks just need to log out and log back in with the new password, and they're good to go. But when we're talking about the contractors, how can you really be sure that once they're no longer working with the organization, that they really are scrubbed from the company's networks and their applications, especially if IT isn't, or the security department isn't managing their access from the get-go?
So there's a couple processes that we try to plug into to provide insight into that. So one is through the purchasing. So if a contractor were to leave, are we continuing to pay them even though they're no longer working for us? So managers tend to keep a close eye on their budgets. And so if a contract gets terminated, have a process that says, well, was that account also deactivated? And vice versa. Sometimes the account gets deactivated, but they forget to cancel the contract. Now you're paying somebody who no longer works for you. So having that check and balance helps. Another area that we've done is put a time limit on contractor accounts. Every 3 months, 6 months, have them expire and force the manager that brought that contractor into the organization to re-enable or re-verify that this account should still continue.
Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think before the Great Resignation started, so many organizations were working with outside contractors to kind of help fill the gaps within the organization, because, if there's one thing that the pandemic showed us, it's where the gaps lie in our organizations, where we need help the most, and working remotely is definitely kind of shown the light on that. just the sheer number of people who have access to the corporate network and all of the kind of crown jewels of the organization as far as data is concerned. That's a huge undertaking for some companies. I also wonder about with the prevalence of SaaS applications, that it could be easy enough for that to be overlooked if somebody who's no longer with the company had access to a particular SaaS application, especially one that was a little bit maybe esoteric in nature, or there were not a lot of users for that particular application. How can an organization ensure that they really are finding all of the things that employee had access to before they start the offboarding process?
So we've expanded our asset management database.
Mm-hmm.
Traditionally, people will track laptops and other hardware, but we also have an application database now to track all of those various cloud and SaaS applications, along with who's the owner, who's the contact point for that application. Then we run periodic audits, run a scan of who all has access and check that against the active roster list to see if there's any that maybe got missed and need to be deactivated.
So how big of a problem do you think this is?
I think it's bigger than people realize. So many people have, as you mentioned earlier in our discussion, are moving jobs. And I think sometimes we rely on the automation and assume it must have worked.
Right.
But are you going back and checking that it really did happen? We know how often software changes. It's so easy to have these automated processes break, and nobody realizes it's broken until months later.
Yeah, we've experienced something like that just recently with something, some of our processes that all of a sudden stopped working. I'm like, why is this not working anymore? And it just turns out that there was an upgrade and the reset button wasn't pushed or whatever it was. But yeah, so that's actually a really good point is making sure that your automation processes are still automating things for you. So that's
right.
That's a really interesting thing. And as far as other technologies to kind of help with this offboarding, efficient offboarding processes, are there certain things that you guys would recommend that organizations utilize in their offboarding process to make sure that it is as secure and as seamless as possible?
Mm-hmm. So many of the identity and access management solutions, come with provisioning and deprovisioning automation and APIs. We also make that a requirement. So if you want to bring on a new SaaS application, one of the requirements is that it integrates into our SSO solution. So that's a checklist that almost like gating factor before you sign that contract. And then, as I mentioned, it's rolling up your sleeves and doing some audits and just verifying that things are working.
That's great. And it's certainly good advice, even if a company isn't really grappling with the Great Resignation and copious numbers of employees leaving their jobs. I think, security hygiene, you can never do it enough. I think having a constant checks and balances of your security technology should be part of an organization's security playbook. So important, especially in these days of ransomware attacks and other malware, phishing attempts, and all of the other things that cyber attackers are just flinging on us these days, it seems like. So good stuff there. Brian, thank you so much for having the conversation with me. I know it's a very relevant topic, and I hope we provided some takeaways for organizations. But thanks so much again for your time. I do appreciate it.
Sure. And one other thing, just before I leave.
Absolutely.
It's not just about technology. One of the two areas that I would stress would be notify people when people leave. If somebody were to leave and you don't tell the help desk, or you don't tell, back when we were in the office, the lobby guards, how easy would it be for a former employee to social engineer their way back in? Because the help desk goes, I didn't know they were terminated, so I'll, re-enable their account. So make sure you have that communication process to protect yourself from somebody who may have bad intent.
That's a really, really good point. And I know that that is something that some organizations are like, do we tell people? Do we not tell people?
Exactly.
But yeah, I guess it's better to be transparent. Anything else before we shut it down?
No, I could talk about this topic for a long time.
And it's a great topic to really dive deeper into. So perhaps in the future we can have another conversation about it and maybe look at it from a little different angle.
Sounds great.
Figure that out. All right. Thanks again, Brian. I appreciate your time.
Thanks again for having me.
You bet. All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more Techstrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Looking for a live conference focused on the tools, technologies, and practices most important to your business? Innotech conferences are live one-day business and technology conferences highlighting the latest in trends for IT leaders, developers, and IT professionals. Each event combines education, innovation, peer-to-peer networking, and the latest technology and business solutions for a diverse IT-focused audience. Innotech conferences occur throughout the year in strategic regional locations, bringing together technology professionals from various industries to learn about the solutions, practices, and tools impacting their day-to-day work and gain insight into what's to come. Presenters at Innotech conferences are selected and curated to ensure each session provides the most up-to-date and relevant information without any hype. Whether you're interested in digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud, IT leadership, or DevOps, Innotech conferences deliver. 2022 events are scheduled to be held in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Washington, D.C. Innotech conferences are produced by Techstrong Live and powered by Techstrong Group.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Techstrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Nikhil Gupta, who is the CEO and co-founder of Armor Code and the Purple Book community. Nikhil, thank you so much for taking some time and joining me today. Do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Great. So I know you've been on Techstrong TV in the past, and I'm not sure how much of a conversation you've had regarding the Purple Book community, but I wonder if you might be able to explain to us a little bit about what the Purple Book community is for those of us who are not as familiar.
Absolutely. In the last conversation, we didn't talk about Purple Book community, but this is something very near and dear to me, and I'm very passionate about that. And I'll start with the origin of how it all came together. So again, a quick background about myself. Prior to starting Armor Code, I was founder and CEO of a company called Avid Secure, which was basically building a AI-powered cloud security posture management, which was acquired by Sophos. And prior to that, 25 plus years of experience. What I found out here in the security industry, there are over 7,000 startups, and half of them, or maybe actually 90% of them, fail because they are building technology looking for a solution. And, the application security, product security, or DevSecOps, it's not the first time or the last time. They have been talking about for over 10 years. And this is a very interesting problem, software security in general, because it at the intersection of three different personas. Number one is the security team. Number two is the developer. And then the third thing is the operations team. Now, what happens here is, whenever you have three different personas with three different incentives, the challenge becomes is how do you solve that problem? And what we did here at Armor Code, and I'll just tie these two things together, was we took a people first approach, because at the end of the day, you want to make sure when three different people personas are getting together, they should be able to communicate. And as a result, I reached out to several of my security co-leaders, and I was talking to them, and I found out that there was no good platform that is talking about software security And this was almost a year and a half. And now with all these issues happening, whether it's a Log4j or SolarWinds, and now even the President Biden's executive order, there's been a lot of emphasis. People are realizing that how important this particular subject is. And when we notice that there is no good platform out there, that is when a group of security leaders got together to start this community called Purple Book Community. And one of the main thing which was driving was coming up with the open source or a free book on software security. And the reason why we came up with this was there are hundreds and thousands of books on software security. The challenge is that these books get obsolete before they come out. And that is why we felt that there's a need to have something which is there and current. And that is where we came up with a book called, which will be releasing very shortly.
Great. So is this a collaborative effort, the Purple Book community? It's something that obviously, there is a very large community around it. So the book itself, is that authored by one person, or is it a collaborative effort between multiple people?
Yeah, no big initiative or movement can be one-person effort. So I'm blessed to have 28 leaders who join hand together, from the likes of Sean Kalfan, who is the CISO of Discover Financial, to Jyoti, who's leading the AppSec efforts, and Fidelity. And there are several other leaders. I don't want to name the name, but if you go to the purplebook.club, you will see all the authors over there. And the idea here, it's a book by the security leaders for the security leaders. And the vision for the Purple Book is to democratize software security. So there has been a big myth that only very large organizations need and can solve the application security, which is not true. In my opinion, even a single individual who's writing a software to a Fortune 1, they all need to take care of the software security. And there has been a lot of education and talk. So the idea here is to gather a bunch of security leaders, and that's where we came together. And it's a book co-authored by 28 other security leaders.
That's great. And everybody's in charge of a particular chapter, or is that how it?
Absolutely. So we have been using the divide and conquer, and so there are different chapter co-leads over there, and different chapters are kind of driving the different areas, and these chapter leaders were chosen based on their background. So like Cassie, who is an expert in supply chain and SBOM, so she led that chapter, and Adrian Peters, who is with Vista Equity Partners, who is an expert in M&A, he's leading M&A chapter, and Teza, who's a compliance guru. So again, it's finding out the best of the breed people, and Upendra, who's again on the technology side. So we found the best of the breed people who are going and talking about the different areas. And yes.
That's great. And I love the fact that you've got so many different people involved, because everybody's got a different viewpoint. Everybody's got a different approach to security. And there's really no right or wrong way to approach something, especially a project on this scale. Having more, some may say it could be counterintuitive to have too many people involved. I don't think that when it comes to cybersecurity, I don't think you can have too many people involved. I think the more people who have a voice and have a seat at the table, the better. So this is a great effort, and I kudos to you for doing this and heading this up. I'm very, very excited to take a look at the Purple Book and see all the different names and all the topics that are in there. Is this something that changes on a regular basis? Do you see this as kind of more of a living document, if you will, that is continuously updated, or is it something that will be in its kind of static form for a particular period of time and then it will be updated later?
No, you're spot on there. So it's a living document, and that is why we are launching it online. And the idea, as I mentioned here, is that the security gets obsolete. So what we wrote almost a year ago would change with the Log4j findings and all. So the idea is to keep it current. One of the biggest advantage of this community, and this is again a very elite community, which is invite only. We now have around almost 150 plus leaders and 300 people who are in the wait list. We want to make sure we are maintaining the quality of the people who are coming in here. And at the same time, this is a trusted community where when issues like Log4j and all come in, people just jump on a Zoom in today's virtual world and get together and share their insight in a trusted manner. So that's where we are keeping a good eye on who joins the community. But the content of the community, we are making it widespread for the other people. And the other advantage here is that typically, if you are a smaller company or even a medium to large size company, you don't have access to these leaders. One thing which I really appreciate about these leaders are they are taking their personal time out, right? This is an effort on an individual basis. It's not representing any company, but they are taking their time out and making themselves approachable and available. And these leaders, again, whatever I say is less about these guys, and they believe in sharing the knowledge increases it because you learn from everybody. So the idea here is you can go to the community, you can read the book, you can make a comment, and you can directly interact with these people. These people are very, very approachable, including myself. And we all have our day job, right? And of course, we are all busy over here. But at the same time, we are all very reachable, approachable. You could just make a comment over there, and then you can reach out to individuals on the LinkedIn, however you want to go about it. But again, the idea here is to have a modern approach of solving software security and modern approach of writing books. Again, as I said, there are like thousands of books which are there and being released on a daily basis, but this is a living document.
Excellent. Excellent. And there is a virtual event that is going to be coming up in mid-May, which, full disclosure, we're actually helping you guys out by hosting it for you. It's called AppSecCon. And as I understand it, it is very closely related to the Purple Book community.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, one of the genesis for the Purple Book community was when we were speaking to these leaders, they mentioned that there is no specific event, very specific focus on software. And that was one of the reasons for us to join hands together and have the world's largest digital application security conference or product security conference called AppSecCon on May 18th and 19th. And I encourage everybody to join. Here you could come and listen and participate and engage with the world's top leaders regarding the software security, application security, or product security. It's a virtual conference, so you could log in. We will make the contents available offline, but when you come to the event, you will get a chance to engage with this leader directly on a one-on-one basis. And again, we are super excited to have that. All these leaders have taken out time. You look at the lineup, and I'm sure we will share the URL, but if you go to the purplebook.club/AppSecCon, Application Security Conference, you can go and register over there. It's a free event. We believe in free knowledge sharing. And we are super excited that we have a great lineup. And this is when we are also launching the book. So some of the chapters are available today. And, the complete book will be launched and released on that time.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I'm looking forward to that event. I know we're doing a lot of planning on our side to make sure that it is a successful event. And, judging from the quality of the speakers and the quality of the content that we've seen so far, I think it's going to be a really, really good one. So I love the fact that the Purple Book community is so involved in this event as well. And the book is going to be launching there. There's going to be a lot of really, really great conversations. And to your point, application security, it moves at the speed of light. So you really cannot rest when it comes to application security. And with so many organizations today being a technology company first and then a whatever company secondary, it makes just the most amount of sense to make sure that your application security is and a work in progress all the time. You can never rest on your laurels when it comes to application security.
Absolutely. In fact, world's largest pharmacy company and all, if you look at them, everybody is telling the world that they are a digital and a software company more than what they are doing. In fact, I was talking to one of the board members very recently, and he made a very good point that we all went through this pandemic, right? World's largest pandemic in like last couple of hundred of years. And imagine that if we didn't have software, how difficult it would have been to pass through pandemic, whether it is ordering the stuff online for the food or even the medicines. And again, having securely provide that platform for all of us as individuals. So like even all of us who are not in technology are touched by application or software one way or the other. And it's thanks to these great leaders who are part of these great organizations who are playing a key role in securing those applications. And so that is where, whether it's software security, application security, DevSecOps, or product security, you name it, whatever you call. But the idea here is to deliver a secure software development lifecycle so that people's life can get better is what kind of excites me, excites the community. And this is where we are super excited to have this conference. And again, I encourage people to come and join there and join this community. Let's join hands together to fight the bigger battle with the bad guys.
Excellent. Well, as I said before, I'm very much looking forward to the event, and I do encourage folks. We do have the URL here on the screen, so folks can take a look at it, and do encourage folks to sign up as well. But Nikhil, thank you so much for taking the time and having the conversation with me today. I do appreciate it. Just a quick reminder: AppSecCon is happening May 18th and 19th, and it is a virtual event, so folks can sign up for it. And as you said, the sessions will also be available on demand after the event if they're not able to make it on those particular days. So, but thank you again for your time. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, and again, once again, big shout for joining the community, all the security leaders who have been spending their personal time on this community. And I encourage people to log in or sign up so that they get information about these events, at the same time also get an updates on what's happening in the security community. So, thanks again, Charlene, for having me.
Thank you. All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more Techstrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
All right, rounding out today's Techstrong TV broadcast, we've got The View with Vizard. In this conversation, Mike Vizard speaks with Nataraj Nagaratnam, who is the CTO for Cloud Security at IBM, and they discuss why cloud security keeps getting more and more challenging. Great topic, great discussion. Let's roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Nataraj Nagarathan, who is CTO for Cloud Security at IBM. We're going to be talking about all things related to the modern cloud and security. Naj, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Mike. Pleasure to be here.
We've been talking about the cloud now for the better part of a decade, maybe a little bit more. And one day short of that, we've been talking about why security is a problem in the cloud. So my first question to you is, what is the current state of cloud security right now? And from your perspective, what is the big challenge? Why are we still talking about this 10 years on?
Great question. In the initial days, like you were pointing out, security was a concern, major concern for people to even figure out what to do with cloud. Is it secure? And so on and so forth. I think as an industry, given the level of what we have built into cloud providers, including IBM Cloud and others, enterprises have gained a level of confidence that they can move some of their workloads to the cloud and start to adapt and innovate. That said, as you look at the landscape of their applications in an enterprise, like front office applications that is dealing with customers, engagements, mobile, etc., when they deal with certain set of data, like much of it like public, internal to some extent, they have moved. But when we really look at enterprises that are dealing with like mid-office and back-office application that deal with sensitive data, confidential data, now it opens up risk on one side, given everything that we hear every day with data breaches, and also compliance, given the increasing regulatory compliance across the globe about where the workload should be, where the data need to be, and how these laws and regulations are becoming stricter every day. Customers are trying to figure out how to do this to mitigate their risk and enable compliance in much more of a seamless fashion. So that's where it's kind of the next wave, where they're looking at the next set of applications to figure out where to move. And that's why it becomes a top of mind, not to mention the increasing regulations on one side and always increasing threats and attacks on the other side.
Let's dive a little bit more into that complexity, because it seems like to me we're entering a new phase of the cloud. Initially, we were lifting and shifting monolithic applications or building yet another monolithic application on somebody else's hardware. Now I look at things in this cloud native, there's Kubernetes, containers, serverless computing frameworks. Is it getting harder to secure all these environments because they are fundamentally different from each other, and it's really hard to have kind of one tool that deals with them all? So what's going on?
Yeah, that you're absolutely right. That on one side, it is about more of a sophisticated and complex application architecture, because it's not simple to take a simple app and move it, but it's connected to their backend systems. Where is your data and all of that? So that leads to modernization. And how do you modernize and how do you secure it, right? Then in the context of security and compliance, when you then look at it to say, it's one thing for one team to move faster, because when you look at enterprises, every line of business want to move faster with reaching to their customers and channels. But to do it at scale and consistently at an enterprise level, for example, financial services and banks that we work deeply with as an example, they want a consistent way to do this, because it is no longer wild, wild west where anyone can go, but they are trying to figure out how do they have a consistent controls framework, set of policies that they will dictate, they will require, that is specific to the set of workloads, and more importantly, to the level of data. Like for sensitive data, you need to do encryption, for example. If so, how do you control it? How do you ensure that customers have full control of their data and the keys and deployment? So it fundamentally comes down to articulating those policies and controls in terms of risk and compliance.
Of course, on top of what we just discussed, there's now multiple clouds that people are dealing with. It was hard enough when I was just trying to secure an on-premise environment, but do security people have a chance now that there are 1, 2, 3 different types of clouds to be dealt with?
Yeah, good question, Mike. As we see, enterprises are going towards a hybrid multi-cloud adoption for sure. And in that context, they may have some front-end application on one cloud, mid-office that deals with sensitive and confidential data on other clouds, or back office even on-premise. When we look at that spectrum, the differences between the clouds, the way they work, the services they provide and APIs have a level of difference and complexity. People are getting over that with automation and integration. But what is happening is, when you look at cloud providers, as customers worry about risk, is my data secure? Am I the only one having access to my data and the keys? And compliance, be it regulatory requirements, that data need to be data residency requirements, and who has access to it. And even under subpoena, you should not turn over the data. When you look at that dynamics, they're trying to figure out how much they need to spend. How much they need to spend to put bolt-on controls and implementations and security on top of the cloud providers. This is where the struggle is. So what we have been working with large number of enterprises, and especially our industry cloud, is the ability for them to have these things built in, so that they can say, hey, my confidential data, when I put it on IBM Cloud, it comes with the level of controls so that I can mitigate risk. My data is only mine. Only I have access to the data or the keys. As well as on compliance, that you can be up and continuous against the continuous regulatory requirements that are going on. So we have built these working with the banks for the banks. So That's where from a skills, technology, and every landscape around increasing regulations and threat is going on that customers are struggling with. That's making it harder for them. Whereas we are looking at it as this is an opportunity to help them in their journey as a secure journey to cloud.
One of the things that I seem to encounter a lot is that people don't really understand that it's not the cloud platform itself that may be insecure as much as it is the processes that we're using. We have developers who now routinely provision infrastructure. They have these tools. That sounds great. We're going to run faster, but they're not security experts. So we wind up with all this misconfigurations, and the bad guys know how to look for that stuff. So what's to be done? How do we close this divide amongst ourselves where maybe we are our own worst enemies?
Yeah, no, that's really important, because on one side, if you ask a normal developer who wants to just innovate at speed to be a security expert at the same time, is asking for the impossible. So to your point, how the ability to build in security, codify these security policies and controls as part of workload deployment, as part of automation, so that it's not just DevOps, but DevSecOps, so that you can have these prescriptive reference architectures that have security built in, and prescriptive controls. Your bucket should be only on private endpoints, your object store should be encrypted with only your keys, and so on and so forth. Codifying these policies, not only just infrastructure as code, but security as code, compliance as code, so that they just need to inherit these. For example, the way we talk about it is people work on the notion of landing zone. Hey, I have a virtualized workload. Where is my landing zone? Is it on IBM Cloud, Amazon, Azure, or on-prem? But we have this notion of a secure landing zone, so that you have built-in security and compliance, so that when you land there, from a reference architecture, infrastructure code, all the way to security and compliance, that these are baked in, that you can kind of have a repeatable process. That repeatability, automation, alleviating the skills requirement for developer to be security experts is going to be key in unlocking the potential.
Do you think as we go along that we just flat out don't have enough cybersecurity people to go around, and for every 25 developers, there's one security person? So how do I kind of narrow that divide? Maybe we need to rely more on AI, but it seems to me we're just shorthanded no matter how we look at it.
Yeah. Absolutely right. Security skills in the industry and the shortage of skills, those are definitely known issues, like you said. Even IBM, as part of what we have worked with and announced a few months back, working with White House on how we are stepping up to improve those skills in the industry. That said, there are, I would say, broadly two sets of skills. One is security analysts who understand, who watch for threat, who know how to deal with stuff. Other is developers with security skills, or how do they build secure applications? Because these are not the same people. One is in development and application organization. Another is in a security organization. We have skills dearth in both sides. The ability to adopt cloud, especially how do we reduce the bar and make it easy for those developers to build secure application, is going to be an important aspect. And that's what we have been completely focused on.
To what degree does it make sense just to rely on a managed service provider for security these days? I remember having a conversation with some folks a few years back where they're like, well, security is too important to outsource, yet we don't have enough people going around and we don't have the skills to do it. So at some point, does the math just say maybe this isn't a business that internal IT teams should be in, and they should just rely on somebody to deliver it as a service?
Good question. If we go back to the two sets of characterization I was just making in terms of security analysts and like who's watching the threat landscape and others, that's definitely needs much more deep skills, and managed security service providers can help with looking at your security operations center, even managing your core infrastructure with security tools like scanning and so on. But in this new world, there's no longer you can build an app, throw it over the wall for a security team or a managed security team to manage it. That doesn't work, because in a cloud native world, you build it, you run it, you operate it, and you're responsible for security as well. So in that kind of a collaborative security model, even an enterprise may have a CISO at the top, But each line of business and application team need to have a security focal who understands those policies and controls enough so that they can weave in, bake it into their application landscape. So that as they run, they need to watch for things so that they don't misconfigure, right? Like you rightly pointed out. So I think managed security services definitely has a role to play, but that is not the answer for not having the security expertise, because it's a fundamentally culture change also for developers to think about their, or even the application or line of business. When they think about risk, they are taking on the risk. Therefore, they need to worry about how their teams can run and operate these services.
You guys just launched something called a unified key orchestration tool. What is that about? And it seems like every time I turn around, there are new tools. So how do I kind of sort through which tools do I need and how do I manage all this stuff?
Good question. So let me give kind of a point of view on a journey here, and then say where this announcement fits in. In the early days of cloud, customers, all they want to do is like, when I put my workload and data, is it encrypted? Check mark. They didn't worry about who manages keys. But then when they started to think about next level of like internal data that they bring on or confidential data, they're like, wait a minute. It's not just sufficient for a cloud provider to manage the keys. I need to manage the keys. So the notion of bring your own key came into play. And all of us, all of our cloud providers, including IBM Cloud, supported that notion. But what we saw happening last like 3 years back and more is customers are worried about when they comes to confidential data, bringing the key to the cloud means you're copying the key, but it's still the keys are in the cloud, right? So the cloud provider has some access to it ultimately. So we want to even reduce that risk completely. So IBM, we introduced a very unique service, what we call keep your own key solution, where it is a single tenant. The customer has complete control, as if it's a private cloud, as if it is on premise, right from the hardware, where the keys are processed, initiating the hardware, the services, everything is completely given to the customer, built on the industry's highest level of security technology, built on decades of experience or with mainframes and other technologies, right? So this keep your own key, think of it as a single tenant, only for that customer, completely dedicated, and provides the highest level of technical assurance that we, even as a cloud provider, we cannot access the key. It is the customer's. Now, that has been phenomenal for us as a key differentiation as part of our regulatory cloud, IBM Cloud for Financial Services, and so on. It enabled customers in various regions, including Europe and others, to say they never moved confidential data to any cloud, but they moved to IBM Cloud because this level of technical assurance is possible. Now, that said, we recognized that it's not only IBM Cloud that they adopt. It could be on-premise. It could be an Amazon, an Azure, and now they have multiple keys to manage. Every cloud provider provides a key management service. So you have to manage keys in Amazon, you have to manage keys in Azure, you have to manage keys in IBM Cloud or on-premise. When you look at it, it becomes a key proliferation, a nightmare, both from a compliance perspective, to your point, skills perspective. Now they need to look at different tools, different APIs. It becomes hard. So what we worked on is to simplify it completely and provide a single pane of glass to manage keys across hybrid multi-cloud environment. That is what we call unified key orchestrator. So using this, they have complete the same level of keep your own key like I just mentioned. So they have completely dedicated hardware technology, hardware rooted HSM, and the keys that they can manage. And now with a single click, they can generate and push the keys to Amazon, Azure, or wherever without even thinking about what those APIs are, how does it work. We hide all that complexity. We make it easy for them to adopt. So that's what we have announced. One for example, one customer in a regional bank in Europe that we have been working with, they had not moved actually their workload to any cloud as a workload, but they have like Azure Office 365 in different branches, and they need to manage keys in different key vaults of Azure. And they wanted a single pane of glass to manage these keys as an example. And they are starting to use our piece, what we announced with Unified Key Orchestrator. So possibilities are enormous because now they have the ability to do it at scale while it makes it simple for them to adopt because it's a single set of APIs and we handle the rest. So it makes it easy. So they can innovate while we help them mitigate their risk and meet compliance.
And I have that vision of the janitor with the 37 keys hanging up in their belt now, but we'll see how that goes. We do hear a lot about zero trust and identity management these days. It's not like I can get out of bed and go buy zero trust. So what should people be thinking about, or how should they be going after that? Because it does seem to start now with identities in versus the platform out, maybe in my mind. But is there some way to think about this that makes it easier for people to kind of get started?
Yeah. Given what we are seeing, the trends that we just talked about complexity, the sensitive data, regulations, and risk, our point of view is they need to start at a data-centric view and say, now I have sensitive data that I need to protect. I need to apply zero trust architecture for a sensitive data compared to an internal data. If you take that approach, then you need to make sure let's say for your internal data, it may be sufficient for users to just authenticate with one factor. It may be sufficient for you to make sure your object store is only on a private network access. So you weave in network and identity. Just encryption with bring your own keys may be sufficient, and log it. But when it comes to sensitive data, if you think of the set of paradigm, now identity, no longer it's sufficient for you to just single factor. You need to have multi-factor authentication weaved in. No longer your object store need to be on private endpoint. You need to make sure only specific applications can connect to it. So you can list your IP addresses and applications, the trusted things that can connect to it and verify it, right? And then to my point on data security, keep your own key. And so that you have exclusive control of the key and data using confidential computing technologies that you can protect. So as you see, the specificity of how you can protect increases with data. Therefore, ultimately, to your point, zero trust. Now, trust but verify. But what level of trust and what you cannot just keep on verifying or keep on having the best level of security for everything. So taking a data-centric approach helps you to weave in the multiple domains of security across identity, network, endpoint, data, and logging and monitoring and so on into a holistic approach so that you don't trust anyone but verify and take a data-centric view.
All right, cool. Hey, that was awesome, guys. Thanks for sharing the insights. We much appreciate that. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you very much. Great to be here. Thanks, Mike.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, that wraps up today's Techstrong TV broadcast. Hope you enjoyed today's conversations as much as I enjoyed bringing them to you. Just a quick reminder, starting next week, we have some live in-person events happening. We've got two happening in Washington, D.C. and one happening actually, it's just one happening, two happening in DC. We've got the Cybersecurity Live one-day event and DevOps Cloud Native Live one-day event. Both of those, as I said, are happening in DC. They're both one-day kind of conference/workshop or hands-on learning events that we are hosting. We also are going to be presenting them at multiple cities throughout the year. So if you don't get over to DC in time, that's fine. We'll see you in Philadelphia or Boston or wherever else we've got them, because we've got them strategically located throughout the year. We've got them in Seattle and Vancouver and so Nashville, Tampa. Anyway, the list is on techstrongevents.com, so you can check it out yourself if you're not able to make this one. We've also got some Initech events coming up. Those are one-day conferences, your standard conference-style events. Those are happening in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and D.C. this year. And those again, are going to be happening throughout the year. The first one is in Austin in, I think, 2 weeks. So we've got a lot on our plate here. We've also got some virtual events coming up and other live events. So I do highly encourage you to check out techstrongevents.com to see the entire lineup. You can check the agendas, the speaker lineups, and register for the events there. So I will see you, I'm going to be in DC next week, but I'll see you here tomorrow for another Techstrong TV broadcast. I hope everybody has a great day. And until I see you tomorrow, please, whatever you do, stay safe.